Diane?
Unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Diane Wall, and I am from Winter Springs, Florida. I have been invited to speak to a couple of the local Rotary clubs. And I was wondering, as part of our advocacy group, do we have a package of information of solid facts? You know, the number of almost 20 million survivors is wonderful to know, so that I can just touch upon certain things. I have just written a memoir that explains my journey of polio and post-polio. And of course, that I'm just trying to reach the local, and I'm reaching out to a couple hospitals. I've written letters to the heads of the directors of rehab. That's a biggie. The directors of physical therapists. You know, everything has a director. So reaching your local people allows you to, you know, have that ripple effect.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
you know, that's my question. And do we have a package that I could use?
Diane, if you put your email, either send it to me directly or put it in the chat.
Okay.
I have a PowerPoint. I mean, a number of them slides are, you know, geared just to me, but you can take a look at that and you know, look at, see if you can use it. And there's other people I'm sure that can do that. So put your, you know, your email in the chat to the main group, and you might get a number of emails.
Right.
You know,
Thank you.
thank you so much for that. You know, when John, Nanny, and I have been lucky enough to speak at a lot of groups, and we used to speak just about the origin story, the polio origin story. And now we have the whole ending of our talks can be about post-polio syndrome. So it's sort of a natural segue. And I cannot tell you how many people will say to me after I speak, I had no idea there was post-polio syndrome.
Yes.
And that's key. That's the takeaway that we want. Everybody knows polio up until the vaccine, and they know people are struggling, but they have no idea. And so we've then become the clarion call of don't forget us. You know, we're still, like Dick always says, we're still here.
That's the thing that we have to remember too when we present, because that personal touch makes a difference. One of my neighbors just read my book, and he said, you know, Diane, I've known you for over 20 years. I had no idea that, you know, that you have post-polio. I knew you were, you know, born with polio. I knew that line, but it's that personal touch on top of the actual facts of post-polio. If we can get the word out locally, that.
Yes, we'll support you in that. John will send you his PowerPoint, and you can pull all the facts off there and make them your own.
Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Nanny?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm copying the email addresses at the same time. I don't have anyone else.
I see Bob.
Sorry.
Bob.
Bob. Okay, I don't see that. All right. I'm sorry, Bob.
Yep, Bob.
Go ahead, Bob. You can't hear you.
He's not on mute.
While you're fixing that, Marianne Carthpolios, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct. Unmute yourself, and if you would like to speak.
Thank you. I really did not intend to speak. I must have hit something that I shouldn't have.
It's okay.
This is a real vague and offbeat idea. I don't know if there's any documentaries or commemorations of President Roosevelt coming up, but if there were, I would think that would be a good opportunity for us, if we could, include information on post-polio syndrome. I know I'm overreaching, but I'm wondering if there's some way that we can get on NPR and perhaps speak there on post-polio syndrome.
I think
Some-
they've done something already. I will go back and take a look. I think they did a piece on it not too long ago, but I will double check that. All you have to do is Google it and see if
Yeah.
it comes up.
Yeah. I was just thinking that we need to somehow get on the media where we can
Yes.
be heard by many.
Mhm.
And as far as getting doctors more involved, I wonder if it is possible of any of our doctors who have done a lot of research on post-polio syndrome, what journals they have published in. I know the American Medical Association or the New England Journal of Medicine is like the gold standard. Is there any way we could get a publication in there to attract the attention of physicians worldwide on the subject of post-polio syndrome?
Maybe Dr. Yulberg can answer that with us today. I'm not sure because she's my go-to now. So if she has a moment and feels like participating, that might be a helpful ending to your question. Dr. Yulberg, you still with us?
We have a number.
Oh, there she is. There she is.
So generally, to be published in JAMA or the New England Journal, it's going to have to be publishing some research, and I'm not aware of any physicians who are actively doing research in post-polio right now.
Okay, Alex Vaughn, unmute yourself and go for it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Vaughn from Dover, Delaware, and I'm a Rotarian. And I've been to a program. I experienced a program just a week ago by the publisher of independent newspapers, who was talking about the difficulties in that industry, and to try to offset some of the deficits. They are branching into other areas of that their publishing expertise lends itself to. One of the things that the gentleman talked about was they're doing more in-depth features on particular topics, and multi-day, culminating in a weekend, like a Sunday edition that gives several pages of information to a particular topic. If independent newspapers can't be the only organization that is moving that direction, and if we have good information that we can feed to a media outlet like that, then I think we've got an opportunity to increase our profile.
Thank you, Alex. Bob, are you still can't hear you? Your microphone is not working. If you want to put a message in your chat on what you want to say, I'll repeat it. Okay, George Allen.
Yeah, going to the sort of final point of the introduction, the need for advocacy. I think there's also the need for advocacy training, and I recall at one point you talking about the groups that were to be set up, and one of them was an advocacy training group. I'm just wondering how that's going to go. The other thing I found more locally to help with that, I just found out about it this morning. There is a Scottish Independence Advocacy Alliance, so I'm going to contact them to see whether how I can hone my advocacy skills, and I think that's important, that folk are, have the tricks of the trade, if you like. So back to the question, where are we with the advocacy training group?
Mhm. Okay.
Ken Masson. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, George, we got overly anxious at the beginning. I think that's a good answer, to get things going, and then we found out we didn't. We were kind of putting the horse, the cart in front of the horse. So we took a few months to try to backtrack and get our documents together, as far as we have created an objective and aims project. So we're going to get back to that, George. It's coming. It's just that we took a couple of months to backtrack and make sure we were going in the right direction before we got to that, George. But it's definitely on the agenda for the future. I just wanted to address on the media thing. And I search the media every day for post-polio syndrome articles, and there's almost nothing. There's almost nothing there. Most of them have got to do with polio eradication, and 98% of it has to do with polio eradication. So we have a lot of work to do on that. But just to answer Mary Ann's comment about getting NPR involved in it, I just recently came across a woman, Christine Wright, who is a new editor, and she has a history both in the media and the nonprofit field of working with people with disabilities. So I connected with her on LinkedIn, and it's my intention to talk to her and see if maybe she can come to us and talk about media and disabilities and how we can get more stories in the media. So
That'd be great. Bob McAllister, unmute yourself and see if we can.
I'm hoping this is a case of third time lucky.
There you go. We got you.
Good evening, good morning. Hello, everybody. I actually have a lot to thank COVID for, because if it wasn't for the last 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't have discovered this wee beastie called Zoom. And I wouldn't have got on so many sites to learn about what I didn't know about, because no one else knew about it either, called post-polio syndrome, because we were all in the dark apart from all you experts out there who knew stuff. One of the biggest things I think that we've got to come to terms with is that there might be 15 or 20 million or 10 million or 9 or 5 or whatever, but we don't actually know how many survivors there are and how many of those survivors have post-polio syndrome, because no one's done the worldwide surveys. No one has done chat to your GP. Oh, hang on a minute, my GP is a bit busy and really hasn't got time to learn about post-polio. And my poor old physiotherapist, they're too busy with other people with other problems. They haven't got time to learn about it either. So I think one of the first platforms that we have to look about is, where are the biggest platforms? Where are the biggest information sources? How many million people are in Rotary? 5, 10, 15? How many?
1.4.
1.4 million. Therefore, 1.4 million people in the next month should be, could be, and maybe should be threatened to be educated about post-polio syndrome, because when you go to local Rotarian meetings, they haven't a bloody clue. They all know about the great savior of let's do away with polio. That's great. That's fantastic. 1.8 billion spent last year, 1.8 billion the year before. Not 1% of that 1.8 billion went into post-polio syndrome, yet the Gateses and the Rotarians and the theses and theses, you're all engaged and you're all involved, but you're actually not linking, you're not talking, you're not actually actioning and doing, because we're all disparate. We've all got little platforms where we want to be advocates, yet in some cases we haven't been taught how to be advocates, and we're all being challenged with the same fatigue, the fact that we're a dying, who said that, bad lad, that we're actually aging quicker than other people, and therefore our energy levels are not the same. But we have people who don't have post-polio. We have people who can be paid to educate and to pass information on, as long as we find the sources for money. So I think the platform, the issues we have is there's probably 2 levels and 4 or 5 avenues. And level one is, how do we teach ourselves to be effective educators to other people? Because when you look as a person with post-polio, there is so much diverse information out there, and it's between 5 years and 20 years old. What's correct? What do I actually tell someone about? Because then someone called Clever John, he actually disputes that or debunks it the next month. And I'm thinking, bloody hell, where did that come from? You know, so we've got to get our facts straight. And then we've got to educate every person who's got post-polio syndrome who wants to be an advocate for it, to give them the right facts. And then we have the second issue, where how do we educate the educators, the GPs, the neurologists, and all these doctors who are on our side? Don't forget they're aging as well. So what do we do with the next generation coming up of doctors and dentists and everybody else? I rest my case. I think, you know, there's enough there to be going on with.
Well, certainly you've expressed our dilemma, you know,
But it
very
is, but you
clearly,
see,
and we
I'm only
understand.
expressing what you've all expressed in the last 3 years. We're just going around in circles in some cases. We haven't actually cracked the nut, as it were. We're just repeating ourselves.
And I think the formation of this group understood that, and that's why we're taking our times and making sure that we have the direction that will satisfy all of the previous lacks.
You can't satisfy us, all of the time. What you have to do is to pick one thing now and do it well, and then later on pick another thing and do it well, and then later on pick another thing and do it well. That way we'll get a better saturation than stop, start, and the ricochet doesn't work. It didn't work for AIDS, and it's not going to work now. People get fatigued. We all saw the Grim Reaper ads, but after 3 years, the Grim Reaper ads were no longer effective because we got Grim Reaper fatigue. People will get post-polio syndrome fatigue if we don't find the right push-button messages for them, and they have to keep shifting. Each generation, each culture, each country will have a different push message. We just have to find them.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Julia.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, I agree with a lot of what Bob was saying, but I also just wanted to share an experience where, two experiences really. I did a national news story where March of Dimes asked me to be interviewed, and for polio, and it was because of the wastewater in New York. I'm in Canada. So I just want to remind everybody that when you're doing something like that, don't assume they know information. Because in my case, I made a point. It happened to be just before World Polio Day. The reporter had no idea about World Polio Day. I talked them into linking the story. Then I talked about post-polio syndrome, and they actually brought in another member from March of Dimes as well that linked. I happen to be a weaver and a spinner, and so they actually sent a photographer here to my driveway in the middle of rural Ontario, and they filmed me spinning in my driveway on my spinning wheel, and they linked it to a friend, Mickey, who has a few years on me. I had polio in 1968 from the vaccine, which I did not mention it was from the vaccine because I was trying to get people vaccinated. But they linked her to me addressing, is this what Julia has to look forward to? Is this what Julia needs to now think about and react to? What can she do to prevent this outcome now? And this is continuing. And I think, you know how they take snippets and they put it together. I was pleased with their end result. Their comment, they did keep an important comment that I felt was very important, was that polio is for life. And they kept that comment very succinctly, and I was very pleased with that outcome. I think Ken has that. I sent Ken that link, I believe, of the global news story. But I just feel that sometimes, like, I would have assumed the interview was 3 or 4 days ahead of World Polio Day. Of course they know World Polio Day, but no, they don't. And of course they're going to make some connection to post-polio. Well, no, they made a bigger connection because I gave them the information. So never assume they understand.
Or no.
And stand up on your, your soapbox.
Right.
And literally this snippet on it ran the national news in Canada, and it reran the next day.
Great.
So it got lots of coverage. And that snippet of stuff on the national news literally took a cameraman and myself. He was here an hour and a half. Like, and I just kept pushing my point, and the reporter was on the phone, and they pieced together a well done story, I think. The other thing I wanted to say was with local Rotarians, I have, there's someone in our family, my daughter's father-in-law, who is in Rotary, and he saw me on this story on the national news, and he texted me and he said, great job, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, and then he said, well, I commented, well, maybe you should be presenting to your local group, as Bob was saying there. And he goes, oh, I think, you're preaching to the converted because we are so involved in end polio. And I went, that's not what I said. I said, you should be presenting post-polio syndrome. Oh, was his response.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. And I said,
We know
no,
that.
that's not okay. It's not, oh, it is. I said, you're looking at me. And I recall that during our daughter's engagement and so on, and the wedding, and they were being very careful and getting COVID vaccines. His response was often that, oh, your mother couldn't have had polio. Like, it was just such a narrow, because I'm younger, I think, right? Like, he was making an assumption. And the reality is, no, bud, yep, right here. And I've persevered to the point where I think I might have him convinced. And I just think that, we need to do a little bit more to do a presentation to local groups,
Right.
to push post-polio syndrome. And that, as I said in the news story, polio's for life.
Mhm.
It doesn't come and go.
Amen.
And I think
Thank
that's
you,
a
Julia.
big thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dick, you're next.
Well, I just want to say I'm really impressed with the 35 folks that are here today. They're all leaders in this advocacy group, and we really appreciate your involvement and your comments. Keep it up.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have my hand up. Well, Bob, I also feel the aspect of Rotary, but what most people don't understand about Rotary is that they're a ground up, bottom up kind of organization. Each Rotary club really controls their own destiny and information and things like that. So what our group is tried to do, and is in the process of doing, is coordinating with the End Polio Now coordinators of each zone, which each zone represents about 15 districts, and each district is anywhere from 40 to 80 Rotary clubs. So we want to impact End Polio Now coordinators, who a lot of them don't know about post-polio syndrome. They know about ending polio and eradication efforts, but a lot of them don't know very little about post-polio syndrome. And these are the people that we feel are the catalyst in the aspect of Rotary. Now, but that's not what our group is all about. Our group is advocacy throughout the world. And for instance, in my area in Delaware, one of the Rotarians is in the Newark, Delaware area, is a very big in their nursing program and nursing education program. Okay, and she's a big supporter of End Polio Now, and I'm working with her to try to get polio and post-polio syndrome into the nursing program education. And that's where we as individuals can really affect our own area. And if we have enough people throughout the world, which we have a lot of people from different countries in this, move forward with their local health programs that are educating doctors. We've said this for a long time, that doctors get about 7 minutes in their education of becoming a doctor on polio. And most of that is the history of polio, not on post-polio syndrome. So those are the areas. That's where we need you folks who are on this meeting, okay, who are so dedicated, to work with it. And that's our goal, is to give you the tools to be able to go out and advocate. Okay, so those are the aspects of that. The next I have is Jim Arnett.
Thank you, John. One of the things I would like to come back to is the idea that how do you effectively get the word spread? Here in the central part of the United States, it's quite a rural area, and many small Rotary clubs or small communities, their only access is not necessarily to television and that sort of thing, but they frequently will have a local radio station that may be broadcast just over a county. What we've been trying to do, at least through Region 36, is encourage the use of podcasts in each of these small towns, where a person similar to myself or one of maybe some of the folks from you can be brought in a very short time, talk about post-polio syndrome. And echoing what John said, we are trying to work with the regional coordinators all around, not only in the United States, but around the world. There are plenty of large parts of the world where there are regions that have a large number of Rotary clubs, and those places are often the only access you have is either some sort of a video feed that's cable, or you have just a local radio station. So we should try to, if you have an opportunity, if there's somebody local that is doing a podcast, say, hey, I'd like to come on and talk about post-polio syndrome. This is just a suggestion. Hope that rings a bell with some of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Ken?
No, I just wanted to add to the advocacy thing about what we are. And I think like you go to a support group and you have different symptoms and you want to share those symptoms and people help out in those situations. I think people should be thinking of us as, okay, I went to a restaurant and I didn't have accessibility because the restaurant didn't have accessibility. What can I do? So turn to us and ask us for some advice on how to do that. Or there was a local media that wrote a story about polio. It wasn't accurate. What can I do? And we're a support group for advocacy. That's what we are. So when you have a situation that needs to be advocated, if that's the right word, turn to us and write to us, and we'll come up with some solutions on how to do that. We are all advocates. We all have the potential of being advocates. Let me give a couple of quick suggestions. I was in the Canadian group, the Matcha Dimes, maybe you were there. There was a woman who they were taking the elevator away to be repaired for 2 weeks, and she was on the second floor in a wheelchair. They can't do that to her. They can't do that to her. They have to provide some sort of solution for her because she can't be stuck in her apartment for 2 weeks. I had a woman who was stuck in a airport in Brazil. She's 30 years old. She has polio. They wouldn't let her on without somebody accompanying her. There is no health issues with her. And so I encouraged her to write to the airlines and the Airlines Association to make sure that she was discriminated against in that situation. We had a gentleman the other day write to us and say, I'm in the airport, I can't get to the food court. That's wrong. And we need to advocate to make changes for that. Advocating takes some courage. And to do that kind of courage, to get that kind of courage, we don't have to be worldwide changers. We can change things one step at a time.
Mhm. I'm glad you added that, Ken, and not only that, that people would write to you and tell you what the issue is, and then we can offer some potential solutions. And yes, people do have to take the lead on that and maybe write to the airline and maybe write to the associations, but we give them the support that they need in order to do that. That's also part of our mission. How do we help just even an individual kind of navigate this world? So I'm glad you brought that up today.
Diane Wall?
I highly recommend any of us to read Judy Heumann's memoir. Talk about advocacy. I mean, I'm just reading it now. I'm almost done with it, but this discrimination issue, it's real. And
Oh yeah, we know that.
And she describes it so beautifully in the book. So it's just, I think it's called The Importance of Being Human, H-E-U.
Yes, U-M-A-N-N. I hope everybody has seen the documentary called Crip Camp, and it's where she met up with other people who, there was one line in that movie that was extraordinary. So there was a young man with very severe cerebral palsy who had fallen in love with a woman with cerebral palsy. And when he came home and said to his mom, I'm getting married to so-and-so, she looked at him and she said, really, you couldn't find a polio? Meaning that we were at the higher end of this, you know, that she would rather he have married a polio. I mean, it was the most strange and wonderful and bizarre. It was quite something.
Yeah.
So
You're very funny.
Thank you, Diane. John McFarland.
Sorry to have absented myself from you. I will send through to Ken, and perhaps you can distribute it, Ken. I sent you the first part of an article from a UK magazine talking about the airline industry. There is now a new, there is another 3-part of that coming out, and it actually concentrates entirely on the US airlines. And it's looking at US airlines and new regulations and bits and pieces which are going through. So I'll send that through, and perhaps it can be distributed out. The other thing was, Ina, I'm not sure if you've actually did this. The steering group was having a little chat amongst itself and said, we need to look outside the USA as well. Has anybody here been looking outside the USA? Because saying we'll get the PHI and, you know, out of North America, there are a lot of people looking for doctors in Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan, all over the place, South Africa, you know, and there's an awful lot. And the PHI directory has a lot of information in it, but it needs to be expanded out a great deal more so that you get things going into it, like the Lane Fox unit in London, like the Amsterdam centres. We need, if we're going to have an advocacy group, we've got to, and Rotary is worldwide, we've got to get the whole of Rotary worldwide, not just the English speaking bit in sort of in a narrow band, with all due respect to North and South, to North America and to the UK. It's got to go right the way across, and we need to get this out much further.
I agree completely.
We're coming up on the hour, so we have 2 more people with their hand raised, and that's where we'll leave it. But Diane Wall, in the chat, there's a request from Stefan. If you can address that, thank you. Marianne, you're next. Unmute yourself, Marianne.
Go. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
Now you muted yourself again. There you go. You're good.
I wanted to ask John McFarland on that article that you're sending to Ken regarding discrimination in the travel industry. If you could send a copy of that to me as well. I recently traveled to and from the United States to Greece, and the trip was a holy nightmare. I experienced discrimination like I've never experienced it before. and also directed to John McFarland. When you talk about getting information out on an international level, your European Polio Union conferences were outstanding. People from all around the world, including myself, were there. And I don't know if anything, I realize finances are a big part of it. There's so many people who can't travel internationally, they can't afford it. But would it could be conceivable that we could have an adapted form of those conferences via Zoom? This is probably a Pollyanna idea, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Good idea.
Right. Can I answer that?
Sure.
2 or 3. Yes, I will get you the article, Marianne. It was in Amsterdam where I first met Marianne at one of those conferences. Stefan, I will talk to as well, because he's the secretary of the European Polio Union, and at some stage or other we could do it. When we were doing those conferences, Zoom wasn't around. It wasn't doing the way it was, and going through from there. The other one that's just suddenly shot through into my mind, you were saying about where were the articles, where were articles about polio, post-polio syndrome, PPS published. There's also a whole rake of articles in the European Federation of Neurological Sciences. There's also stuff in the Journal of Rehabilitation Medicine, where the last one where we did, it had 70 pages of articles on PPS. And there's also other stuff coming through in publications from organizations like Eurodis, which is the European Rare Diseases organization. So there's an awful lot of stuff floating around in there. I will try and write it all down and put it together. And then once again, it can, I'm sure that Ken will put it out on the mailing list or into the newsletter.
Okay, before we go to our last participant, George Allen, Bob McAllister, Constance put a comment in there requesting information from you. Okay, George, you're on.
Yeah, just to follow up on what John was saying about a lists of medics. We in SPPN have a short list of medics in Scotland, and we had to go through the procedure of actually saying, well, we know you've got some some experience of, can we put you on our list? And we've done that. And the British Polio Fellowship also has a fairly substantial list of medics. But another point, quick point I wanted to make was, we just talk about Polio Day or Polio Week or PPS Day or PPS Week, but there's all sorts of other weeks and days around the calendar. I mean, one coming up very shortly is Brain Awareness Week. And we know that, the brain has been affected by polio. So we should be in there to say, help people to realize that, well, if you think about brain diseases or brain injuries and all the rest of it, how many do you know? And did you know that polio sits in there? And there are all sorts of other days, just like in terms of general disability. There are loads of opportunities to flag up and say, well, so that people can think, well, okay, yeah, I only knew about MS, or I only knew about this, the MMD, which has got a high profile. I didn't know that polio was that bad in its second phase.
John Narney, I will also send a list through to Ken and a link of a organization which publishes all the awareness days and the dates of all the conferences on neurological conditions.
Awesome. And
Excellent.
And I will be turning this back over to Ina for our conclusion.
Well, this is, the kind of engagement that we want. We want to know what you want to know from us, and that's going to help us with our strategic planning and getting things done. So I can't thank you enough for all coming on today and for sharing your concerns and your ideas. I think we can all start with thinking about what local media you can access. You are a resource to these people who need to fill up every line of the newspaper and every minute of the radio. And I think you're an extraordinary resource for them. So do not be afraid to reach out to them and tell them you have a story to tell. And that's us for today. I can't thank you all enough. I wish you a peaceful day, and I love you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. If the steering committee can stay on, I appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, I'd love to just add that Constance has put a great mind map on the chat. It's a really helpful document. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Mind mapping is what I've been doing for the last 45 years of my career as an educator.
Yeah.
It's how I think.
So
And this was
helpful.
only in 10 minutes. So I know if I get a pool of people thinking about stuff, there's going to be a whole lot more that can be added to that. But it gives a roadmap and direction and a place for us to begin in terms of actually doing things.